The Adams Archive.
The Wagner Group having allegedly attempted a coup against Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin. First thing we're going to do here is learn a little bit about the Wagner Group, and then we will dive into the events that occurred over the last several days. This is probably the craziest military situation that we've seen in my lifetime, that we've actually had play out in public. What's probably even more interesting about this is what's going on in the background and what really actually happened here. So we'll talk about some of the ideas behind it, some of the unverified claims about how Vladimir Putin got Prochevsky, or however you announce his name, Prigozhin, sorry, Prochevsky was somebody else, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who provides gun for hire. So here is the video about the Wagner Group.
Let's talk about the Wagner Group.
Secretive Russian mercenary group.
A shadowy private security company that has ties to the Kremlin.
Wagner Group has a gruesome reputation.
The Wagner Group has been around for about 10 years, and its forces have shown up in all sorts of places, from Syria to Mali to Mozambique.
What Wagner is doing is essentially acting as a proxy for the Russian government in different armed conflicts.
And recently, they've been getting a lot of attention because of what they're doing in Ukraine.
Wagner went from being this small, kind of special forces like mercenary group in Africa to sort of large cannon fodder on the fields of Ukraine.
So what do we actually know about the Wagner Group? What it does, where it operates, and who's behind it? Now, the Wagner Group is secretive and hard to define, but basically, they get paid to send their armed personnel to different countries. You could say that makes them mercenaries, but that word has a legal definition that doesn't always fit with what they do. They're also often described as a PMC, a private military company. But that doesn't quite fit either, because Wagner isn't just one company.
It's better thought of as a loose network of companies, financial intermediaries that are all linked together in as opaque a way as possible so as to make it difficult to understand what their financial and organizational links are, and to make it very difficult to hold them accountable for their actions.
Now, the group first appeared in 2014 when Russia illegally annexed Crimea and sided with pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine. Footage of masked soldiers in unmarked uniforms started cropping up. People were calling them little green men, and at least some of them were linked to the Wagner Group. Now, the group's name is in reference to the German composer Richard Wagner, who was Hitler's favorite. And Wagner was apparently the battlefield call sign used by a guy named Dmitry Utkin, who used to be a special forces officer in the Russian military. He's often been talked about as the group's founder and is reportedly still involved. But the man you really need to know about is Yevgeny Prigozhin, a Russian oligarch. For years, he denied having any links to the Wagner Group. But recently, that changed. In late 2022, he came out of the shadows. There are now several videos of Prigozhin at work, with his forces on the ground and trying to sign up new recruits. Prigozhin also published this statement claiming that he founded the group back in 2014. He officially registered the company as a consulting business and opened up a flashy new headquarters in St. Petersburg.
It's a nice building.
Which is significant not only for being Wagner's first official headquarters, first formal existence on paper and on property, but also for the fact that it is located on Russian soil, where PMCs are technically illegal.
Military work is a private organization. However, Prigozhin works in tandem with the Ministry of Defense and the Russian Federation. In tandem with the Russian Special Services. He obviously enjoys the patronage of top officials of the state, including President Vladimir Putin.
Now, Prigozhin's relationship with Putin goes back to the 1990s. They're from the same city of St. Petersburg, where Prigozhin went from selling hot dogs to owning several restaurants. And Putin was a regular customer. After becoming president, he brought along some pretty well-known dignitaries, and Prigozhin picked up the nickname of Putin's chef. Soon he was scoring some pretty lucrative catering contracts, including for the Russian military. Over the years, he's become super rich, politically influential, and has built up a media empire too.
Biography of Yevgeny Prigozhin is a fairly standard biography of a St. Petersburg bandit.
Wagner Group itself. Since they first popped up in Ukraine in 2014, the Wagner Group has been active in at least 8 other countries.
All right, so there you have your background. All right, Prigozhin was his chef. Didn't know that. That's interesting. It's kind of a crazy 007 kind of background story to be a mercenary oligarch leader of private military organizations. So that's pretty wild. So let me give you my take on this, what happened in my own words, and then we'll look at some of the words that came out of Putin's mouth and Prigozhin's mouth over the last 24 hours. So what happened here was Prigozhin said that Vladimir Putin turned their weapons on the Wagner Group, killing a bunch of their soldiers in what looked to be one of their locations that they were held up at, their headquarters. Now, this was like out in the woods somewhere. Now, there was some questions surrounding the validity of the attack because the video that came out, the only video that came out, was one where they were walking through the woods and they said that they were getting shelled by Russian forces, which would mean explosions, craziness. So from that, there was no charred evidence. There was nothing that in the videos that they saw anyways that showed that there was truly any damage from explosives. So there was some questions about that. And it looked like they just kind of like shoved some material down on the ground. So I'm going to pull up one of the better news sources that I have, which is Atlas News, which is a great one to follow. Atlas News or atlas.news3 on Instagram. And this has been following this all pretty heavily. And it goes back to show from the very beginning where they claimed to have been hit. And they even go into some of the ideas surrounding it. So let me see if I can find the quick video on this. Because somebody commented and was like, why is there no charred material? And so there's this idea that it was potentially a false flag, that Yevgeny Prigozhin has accused the military forces of attacking Wagner PMC camps near Bakhmut through missile strike, claiming that there were many casualties. He believed that we will decide how to respond to this evil doing. The next step is ours. Russia's Ministry of Defense has denied any involvement and said that Prigozhin's claims do not correspond with reality and are an informational provocation. Now, somebody responded and said, what was that on the second slide? This is the one where they're walking through the forest, where there's some trees that are downed, somebody laying in the woods, and really nothing other than that. And when they responded to that, they said, what was the second slide? I have a lot of questions about that. What was it supposed to be? Showing the aftermath of the alleged middle strike? Looks pretty fake to me. 2 small fires and the guy laying down in some very neatly cut trees and brush. No scorch marks or brush or burned leaves. Seems kind of like Wagner is just saying, oh, they hit us with missiles, and then tried to throw together some false flag fake video evidence in like 5 minutes. Atlas News responded and said, yes, and that's essentially what the MOD was saying. Interesting to see how this plays out regardless. All right. Somebody else responded and said, I just hope both teams have fun, which is probably my favorite response to all of this. And then somebody else said, let's see if, because there was a comment on here that was like, why would they be attacked by the Russian army? It said, through some loophole, the Russian MOD used treason for an excuse to execute these strikes. From what I've heard, they've been doing this throughout the war in little skirmishes. Maybe Russian army wanted to kill some real Nazis for a change. Well, looks like they're on both sides. Interesting. So, some people claim that this was an alleged false flag to begin with the Wagner Group, saying that they were struck by the Russian military, using it as an excuse to conduct a coup. In response to that, Wagner head Yevgeny Prigozhin has released several audio statements on his Telegram channel following the claim that Russian forces attacked Wagner positions, reportedly resulting in heavy casualties. From this, he said, justice in the army will be restored, and after this, justice for the whole of Russia. Those who destroyed our guys today, who destroyed tens of thousands of lives of Russian soldiers, will be punished. So obviously a lot larger than handfuls. There are 25,000 of us, and we are going to figure out why this chaos is happening in the country. We must end this disgrace, he said. Now, they went on to accuse Russian forces of attacking Wagner positions. That ends up turning into a video by Prigozhin, who says that they're going to mobilize towards Rostov. So basically, they end up setting up different checkpoints along the way in Russia on their way to go to Moscow to take over the government. That was the idea. This guy's going to take over the government using Wagner Group as to facilitate it, overthrow Vladimir Putin, and then take over. That was the idea from this Russian military mercenary group. Now, from that, they start moving towards Moscow. Vladimir Putin orders that they start digging up the roads between Moscow and wherever positions they were in. Now, between that, there was tanks, there was soldiers, there was moving positions, there was some firefights that happened. On their way to Moscow, during that time, somehow or another, probably between exchanging of funds. Now, what I said was interesting about this is the $6.2 million that ended up missing last week, from an accounting error. Now, all of a sudden, a Russian military for hire is now going after Russia. So kind of weird timeline of events, right? And if it's a mercenary group that's for hire, I'm pretty sure the CIA has the only ability, along with the Federal Reserve, to print money at will. So if they want one side to win, or they want to fund, an uprising or a coup and install Prigozhin, the head of a mercenary group, as the head of Russia to man over 15,000 nuclear warheads, then they'll do so, just with money. Vladimir Putin responds, says we will wipe them out completely if they decide to do this. And then somehow or another, there's an exchange verbally, and the Wagner Group steps down as they're on their march towards Moscow. Now, the conspiracy behind this, the untold story here, is that allegedly, and I got this from Atlas News, which was getting it from Telegram channels in Russia, allegedly, Vladimir Putin scooped up, basically kidnapped Prigozhin's wife and child. And at that point was when Prigozhin decided to go to Belarus, because the president of Belarus stepped in and said, hey, let's de-escalate this. We'll take him, and so somehow or another, whether through kidnapping his wife and child and threatening their lives, or between just a, very nice exchange of words and whiskey between men, they figure out that they're no longer going to invade and overthrow the government. Now, Prigozhin's seemingly in Belarus right now. Vladimir Putin has put out a statement since this alleged coup attempt, which we will listen to in a moment. And so has Prigozhin. So we'll listen to that as well. All right. So Putin says mutiny organizers will be brought to justice in national address. Does not mention Prigozhin. Let's go ahead and read this article, which again is coming from Atlas News. During a national address, Russian President Vladimir Putin pledged that the organizers of the Wagner rebellion will be brought to justice, saying that it was criminal activity that weakens the country and is a colossal threat to security. Putin, however, did not specifically name Wagner head Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was previously assured that the Kremlin he would not face any criminal charges of treason. Putin also thanked security forces of Russia and specifically honored the Russian pilots who were shot down by Wagner forces as they moved towards Moscow. The president also said that a majority of Wagner area patriots of Russia have shown their courage in defending Donbass, but were encouraged to fight against their compatriots. He thanked Wagner commanders and soldiers for turning back to prevent tragic and devastating consequences. Lastly, he thanked Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko for achieving a peaceful resolution with Wagner and the patriotic duty of everyone that has saved Russia. That was Vladimir Putin's words. All right. Now, Wagner had Prigozhin releases his first statement since the mutiny. Prigozhin has released his first statement since calling off his armed mutiny in Russia over the weekend. An 11-minute audio message published on his personal Telegram account. Below are some main points that have been translated by War Translated. It says, what were the prerequisites for the March for Justice? Wagner carries out tasks around the world. It was meant to stop existing on July 1st, 2023. Employees all refused to sign the contract with MOD, but 1% to 2% decided to join the Russian army. The original plan was to go to Rostov on 30th of July and transfer all vehicles to MOD, which were ready for transport. Despite any aggression, Wagner suffered a missile attack, followed by a helicopter attack. Around 30 PMC, Wagner fighters died. This triggered an immediate decision to move out early and respond militarily. So sounds like I was right. 30 fighters died, not tens of thousands, as that previous one said. It says, note, on Friday, June 23rd, Prigozhin accused Russian military forces of striking a Wagner camp near Bakhmut using missiles and helicopters. He has also accused Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu of orchestrating the attack, further stating that the attack would not go without response and that the evil brought by the military leadership of Russia must be stopped. Throughout the 24-hour march, one column went to Moscow, another to Rostov. They made 780 kilometers of progress in one day. They regret being forced to attack the army aircraft, but the bombs were dropped, which caused the response. During the march, all military objects on the way were blocked and disarmed. None of the military have died on the ground. It says, note, Wagner forces downed several Russian military aircraft over the weekend, including an IL-22M airborne command post, in which all members died. The objective was not to allow the destruction of Wagner and to take responsibility for those who were on the unprofessional actions made a huge number of mistakes during the SMO. All the military met along the way supported this. Wagner stopped when the Advanced Storm Unit deployed artillery, conducted reconnaissance, and realized a lot of blood will be shed in the upcoming battle. They decided that the demonstration of the protest was enough and turned around. Factors that made Wagner turn around: first, they didn't want to shed Russian blood. Secondly, they wanted to demonstrate their protest, not overtake the authority of Russia. Prigozhin had previously claimed that this was not a coup attempt, but rather a march for justice aimed at Russian leadership. Lukashenko offered to find solutions for further legal operation of Wagner legally. Columns turned around and went back to field camps. The march showed many things demonstrated before: serious security concerns around the country. All military bases and airfields were blocked. If actions on the 24th of February 2022 were done by forces as trained as Wagner, the special operations could have ended in one day. This shows the level of organization that the Russian army should be following. Wow. Pretty crazy. So there you have it. That's the breakdown of what happened between the Wagner group and the Russian military. They allegedly raided Prigozhin's estate or whatever, where they found a alarming amount of James Bond material, including what looked like $6.2 billion in a bag. Wonder where he got that. And gold bars, a expired passport, as well as some other materials that they got from wherever he was staying at the time. So there is your quick breakdown, but probably one of the wildest, craziest military operations that happened during our lifetime. Absolutely insane. All right. This says that rebellion in Russia, this is a new headline, says more cities seized by Wagner as Putin vows to crush rebellion, likening it to 1917. That was an article from before. All right, let's see if there's any updates before we move on. And it appears, says that the last one that we talked about is there. So many people are speculating that Prigozhin's just going to, disappear suddenly. But there was also a QAnon-esque, a cryptic message on his Telegram with him putting his finger to his lips in a shh motion, saying that do not let them know your next move. Pretty wild stuff. All right, so that is what happened in Russia. There is your breakdown. I did a 30-second, 40-second breakdown on my Instagram at the Austin J. Adams, and you can check it out there as well. All right. Next thing that we will talk about here is going to be a massive rally in Pyongyang to commemorate the beginning of the 1950 Korea War. But first, I need you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Leave a 5-star review. Head over to antielite.club. Subscribe to the Substack, austinadams.substack.com.